G'day, freedom lovers. We've got a bit of a feedback thing going on here. It's a bit weird in my cans. Hopefully it stops. And it's probably because I've got volumes up there. What a way to start. But anyway, I'd also like to extend a very warm welcome to my new friends at Cafe Lockdown. Today is my first time live streaming to Cafe Lockdown, and wow, I'm stoked. And just to start off with a nice big kick, I'd like to introduce you to a good friend of mine, Darren Dixon. Hey, how are you, mate?
Yeah, Paddy, how are you?
Very good, mate. This chat's been a long time coming. I
Very
know you're a
true.
very busy man, and it's hard to get a hold of you sometimes. So I really appreciate the fact you've come and joined us today, mate. How you
And
going?
yourself, I hear you're quite busy now. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
good. I'm good. Still in Her Majesty's Prison, the state of Victoria, which we must tell the viewers that you escaped from Her Majesty's Prison a few years back
I
and went
most
to the
certainly did.
sunny shores of Queensland. Well,
That's
not
it.
so
And
much the shores, but
well, we're not too far from the shore here in Townsville. There is a bit of a beach, but I'm not certainly living on said beach, but it's reasonably close, a lot closer to a beach than I was when I was in Victoria, that's for sure. And like I mean, yeah, it was 6 years ago, and I managed to make that exit. But seeing what you guys went through, it was a wow, I dodged a bullet, but it was also a man, I'm not down on the front line with me good mates on this one. It's a so sort of it was a tough place to sit because yeah, I was glad that I wasn't going through dictator Dan's communist land, but at the same time I was also I wished I could have been there on the front line with you guys.
yeah, oh, totally. Totally. Yeah, would have been interesting watching it from afar.
Yeah, it was. It was definitely, like obviously, we were in a minor lockdown up here. I think we got maybe 2 weeks and another 3 day stint or something. It's kind of a bit of a
Mhm.
fading of a memory, but just sitting there watching what happened in Victoria, like whoa, whoa, it was amazing. But anyway, the thing I really wanted to discuss with you, and I hope this really resonates with a lot of the viewers too, is that we've known each other for quite some time. Once upon a time, there I was. I got a speeding fine. I'm like, man, this is ridiculous. Right down the road from my own doorstep, coming home from work, and well, I may as well have not gone to work that day. I'm just sitting here thinking, this is wrong. This is not good. And I go down to see our fellow mate Strawny. And I don't know if he's watching, but if you watch it at some point, g'day Strawn, how are you, mate? And he goes to me, I vent, and he
Or
says,
as I've colloquially termed him, the Strawn Man.
not a bad call, I'll pay that one. And, so I vented to good old Strawn, and he goes to me, Darren's working on some stuff. He reckons he's got a good way of sort of beating these fines. I'm like, I'm all ears, Darren. What can you tell me? And that kind of led to a very interesting journey of discovery for me. And we routinely had a bit of a yarn about the new things you were discovering and learning, and that it took us to the Community Law Resource Association and whatnot. Would you care to tell the viewers what was the kind of that pivotal moment where you've gone, nah, I've got to do something about this and start learning these things?
Well, it's interesting because I was overseas in 2007, and I got back, and I'd been away for a few months, and I got back, and there was this talk about how Australian troops were going to Iraq, and I was like, wow. And there was talk about what was happening, how they were getting involved, or they were involved with the coalition of the willing, and I didn't like where my tax dollar was going, and so I started looking at all of this, and they were bombing innocent people, and I just basically decided to make a moral stand and say enough is enough. And I actually had a fair few infringements, and so a good friend of mine actually reached out to me and said, "Oh, there's these meetings called the Community Law Resource Group." It was CLRG at that point in time, and so we went down to a library in the outer eastern suburbs, and here were these blokes talking about the Constitution, and I was like, that's quite interesting. I wasn't really fully aware of the Constitution at that stage, and yeah, I started looking into things and started going to the meetings once a month, and these guys had a lot to say, and there was a lot to learn, and so it just seemed to resonate with me, and it seemed like the right place to be. And yeah, so and at the same time, I wanted to try and expiate some infringements that I'd acquired over the years, and that was just sort of at the time where things were going to going to computers. They brought in their online systems and everything, and the Infringements Act had come out in Victoria in 2006, and was a whole new system. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go to court and I'm going to fight all these fines, and I'm going to learn as much as I can. And when I feel confident enough, I'm going to go to court. And so I struggled along and learnt what I needed to learn, and then finally went to court and lost the first time. You know, as most people who are watching this would experience, you lose the first time. I know a few people who have won the first time, but usually that's under the guidance of a friend that's been there and lost the first time.
Someone like
So
yourself.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But
I know
I've
you've
gone into
certainly helped
court.
me.
Yeah, I've gone into court with many friends, and we've pointed them in the right direction, and they've actually won the first time. I've got a friend, Tony, who's moved down to Tasmania now, and I don't believe he's actually ever lost a case. And and he sort of came into this around about 2017, somewhere around about there. But yeah, I got to this point where I had amounted a large number of infringements, and and to cut a long story short, one day I got pulled up at a booze bus, and which I was double zero, and I went to drive off, and they said, "You have to pull in here and have a discussion with the sheriff." So I pulled in there, and I'd been doing a lot of research on warrants, because I kept on receiving all these correspondences uh, that a warrant had been issued, and I was like, well, it's just a notice that says a warrant's been issued, but where's the actual warrant itself? Why aren't I getting the warrant itself? And so I started looking into the legislation, and funnily enough, there were provisions in there that actually said that an infringement warrant must be in the prescribed form. And then I found in the regulations, there were regulations that corresponded with this and backed it up and said the warrant must be in the prescribed form. And it was interesting, because if you speak to the sheriff, they say, no, it doesn't have to be in the prescribed form. There's certain legislation that's changed now since then, and I believe it's because of certain things that we did over those times, where we actually proved that warrants didn't actually exist, um,
Oh,
which was
hang
quite
on.
interesting.
Warrants don't exist, like as at all, or just warrants for these traffic infringements.
Infringement warrants. So I'm not talking about other warrants such as arrest warrants or search
Okay.
warrants or anything like that.
Yeah.
Although
Cool.
many people will testify to the fact that when the police bashed down their door and said that they had a search warrant, they didn't actually have one. I've seen I've seen friends with photos where with police holding up warrants that say not for execution across them and things like that. So,
Wow.
um, but yeah, it's interesting. So I basically unpacked all this legislation, and I just kept on applying myself, and kept on reading, and I came to the conclusion that through what I'd seen in other people's experiences, that no one had ever seen one of these warrants. So I thought, I'm going to write to, and it was Civic Compliance Victoria at that stage. I wrote to them, and and it was quite interesting. I said, "Oh, look, according to this particular section in the Infringements Act, it says that a warrant must be in the prescribed form." And the regulations back it up as well. And in the regulations in the schedule is the prescribed form for a warrant. And I said, "You keep on sending me these correspondences which say that there's a note, which is a notice that there is a warrant, but it's not the warrant itself." And I was like, that's like going to school and giving your teacher a note that says, "I've got a note from my mum of why I was absent, but it's not the note from my mum. Just a note
Yeah.
saying that I've got a note from my mum." And, and I'm just thinking, this is completely wacky. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, getting back to the roadblock where I went in to see the sheriff, there was like 9, 10, 11 sheriff's cars. There was over a dozen of them, and they came up to me straight away and they said, "Oh, sir, you've got X amount of warrants, and they're overdue." And I said, "Would you be able to provide me the warrants in the prescribed form? Because I've been asking Civic Compliance Victoria, been asking the sheriff, been asking the police, been asking everyone. Can you please produce the warrants in the prescribed form as the statute prescribes?" And they were like, "Oh, okay." And so they've got their computers there, and they print out this, what's called a schedule of details. And it's just a summary, it's just a little box after box after box with some details of each offence. And he hands that to me and he says, "They're the warrants." I said, "No, they're not the warrants. That's just a schedule of details." And the reason why I was calling that is because when the sheriff can execute a warrant, if there's any other outstanding warrants, they can give you a schedule of details with those details within it, with the execution copy of the warrant.
Right.
So, and I'm saying, "Well, where's the execution copy of the warrant?" And they're saying, "No, that's the warrants. You've got them." And I said, "No, the legislation says it here, 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 and here. And if you go to the schedule in the infringements regulations, you'll see that, yeah, there is a prescribed form." And I'm looking for that because that's the paperwork that validates it. Like I said, it's like turning up to search someone's house, claiming there's a warrant, and you haven't got one. It's
Yeah.
exactly the same scenario.
Which
And the
is
magistrate,
fundamentally breaking the law.
well, in a way, yeah. So anyway, and I said, "Look, if you can produce the warrants in the prescribed form, I will pay double," because I was confident that they couldn't produce them because I've been asking for so long. And all of
Yep.
these sheriffs just stopped because I was being quite loud about it. And they all turned around and I said, "Yeah, guys," I said, "if you produce the warrants in the prescribed form for me right now, because you're telling me there's warrants, you've
Mm.
got access to the computer system, you've just printed me out the details of the warrants. So, it was a speeding fine, it was on this date, and here's the license number and the person's name." I go, "But what about the prescribed form that comes in, which is about 2 or 3 pages long?"
Mm.
And I said, "I'll pay double." I go, "That means you can put the money off to the warrants, and then whatever that is, the amount was thousands of dollars. So you can put the rest of that in your pocket." I go, "So just print them out. Happy days, and I'll pay."
Mm.
And they said, "Look, you will have to go to the infringements court." Bom, bom.
Wow.
And
There's a can
so
of worms.
yeah, they made me park my car up there. And it was my work van actually, and it had the tools of my trade in there.
Mm.
And so it was quite interesting because I went to the infringements court, and to cut a long story short, they didn't have the warrants in the prescribed form either. And they said, "You have to go to the sheriff's office." And I
Mm.
said, "Really?" So I went and rang the sheriff, and the sheriff said, "No, you've got to go to the infringements court or civic compliance." And it was just this merry-go-round where they know they can't produce them, but they send you to each place just to waste your time. And by the time
Yep.
I got back to where my vehicle was parked, they had towed it, and I will say they stole it.
Yeah, well,
And
especially if they've got no warrants, how else could you describe it?
exactly. So what I did is I made an application to the magistrates court to have my vehicle released. And to cut a long story short, the magistrates court released my vehicle to me without any impound fees or towing fees or anything. So that was a bit of a feat in itself.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
when it was quite interesting when the magistrate issued the order, he said, take that up to the infringements court, which is like 10 doors up from the magistrates court in the city. Take that up there and they will give you the details of where you can pick your vehicle up. So I take it up there and I hand it to them and they say, oh, the order's not worded correctly. I said, what do you mean? They said, oh, it's got to say this, this, and this, but it only says this, this, and that. I go, okay. So I go back down to the magistrates court, walk back into the court, and the magistrate sees me and he says, yes, waits till the end of the next matter. He says, yes, Mr. Dixon, what are you back for? I said, well, they said that this is worded incorrectly. They said it must say this, this, and this, and you put this, this, and that. And he's, oh, really? So he gets it and he changes it and he goes, all the best, Mr. Dixon. So I headed off back to the infringement court, and now they're saying the same thing. Oh no, it says this and it's meant to say that, and they kept on going. And this happened like 3 or 4 times where they made me go back in front of the
What?
magistrate. And the last time he said, "You tell them if this order is not worded correctly now, for them to come down here, okay, and I will hold them in contempt of court." So I went back and I told them. They went, "Oh yeah, okay, you can have the vehicle. Go and pick it up here." And so I went and picked the vehicle up. Lo and behold, 3 months later, I get this big, thick envelope in the mail, and it's basically uh, it's an application to the magistrates court from the sheriff's office, and the sheriff's office are going into the magistrates court to challenge the jurisdiction of the magistrates court. And I'm laughing, going, what's
Oh.
this all about? And so I read on, and it says that they're challenging the magistrates court's jurisdiction for releasing my vehicle because apparently I used a form that wasn't applicable for the actual release, but somehow I managed to get them to release it with a few twists and turns. And so they wanted to close that loophole.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, and it said you have the opportunity to go and make submissions. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try and knock this out. So I go to the magistrates court, before I get there, or before the day of the matter, I went in there with the paperwork to the registrar, and I saw the registrar, and I said, look, I said, check this out. I said, the sheriff's coming in to challenge the magistrates court's jurisdiction for releasing my vehicle. He's give me a look at that. I go, it's pretty cheeky, isn't it? He says, yeah, it is. I go, he goes, well, what do you want? And I said, well, this is all about warrants. I go, I want to subpoena the warrants in the prescribed form because I've been asking for them for over 5 years. I haven't been able to produce them. And if they can't produce them, then they lose subject matter jurisdiction over the matter, and they can't rule in favour of the sheriff. And I said, "Can I subpoena the warrants? Can you sign that for me, a subpoena?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'll do that." So he signs the subpoena, and I deliver it to the sheriff's office, or sorry, to Maddox Lawyers. It was Maddox Lawyers actually. So anyway, a week or two later, I go to it was a couple of weeks later, I go to the magistrates court, and basically Maddox Lawyers there and a particular sheriff. I won't mention her name, but she worked for the sheriff's office for 28 years at that stage, so she was in the hierarchy. And they're saying, "So what do you want to do today, Mr. Dixon?" And I said, "Well, I want to make some submissions." And he's, "What about?" And I go, "Did you bring the warrants?" And he says, "No, we didn't bring the warrants." And he goes, "We won't get the warrants." I go, "Oh, it's interesting." And I said to the sheriff, I said, "How long have you been working for the sheriff?" sheriff's office for? She says 28 years. I said, can I ask you a question? She said, yeah. I said, in the 28 years you've been working for the sheriff, have you ever seen a warrant in the prescribed form? She looked away like this. And I was like, kaboom, there it is.
Mm.
And so we went into court, and the matter began, and basically I was on one side of the bar table and they were on the other. And they're saying, oh, Mr. This is a matter, and Mr. Dixon has 17 warrants. And I go, objection, Your Honour. He said, well, what are you objecting about? And I said, well, he's claiming that I've got 17 warrants. I go, I've been asking for them for over 5 years in multiple correspondences to the sheriff's office, the police, and civic compliance, and the infringements. I've been asking everyone. No one's been able to produce them. And I say that this court lacks jurisdiction to hear this matter and to give the sheriff what he wants unless they can produce the warrants, and then they will gain subject matter jurisdiction. And see, when you go to court, the court, there's certain jurisdiction that they must gain before they can begin, and one of them is subject matter jurisdiction. So jurisdiction over the subject matter, jurisdiction over the parties. And we won't get into the power and authority because that's a whole another discussion.
Yeah.
About where the power and authority comes from.
So how does that go down? Like, I mean, obviously we can explore those kind of concepts a little bit later, perhaps. But like you've just given them a big shit sandwich and asked them to take a bite. How'd they go?
Well, the magistrate turns to the lawyer and he says, "Well, Mr. Dixon's right. Have you got the warrants?" And he said, "Oh, no, we don't have the warrants." And he said, "Well, what have you got?" And he goes, "Oh, we've got 17 enforcement orders." I go, "Objection, Your Honour." He says, "Why are you objecting?" I said, "Well, the sheriff can only act off the issuance of an infringement warrant and not the issuance of an enforcement order. Isn't that correct?" He looks at the lawyer and says, "Yeah, that's correct. What else have you got?" And he goes, "Oh, well, we've got the 17 infringements as well." I go, "Objection, Your Honour." He's, "Stop objecting, Mr. Dixon. Let's just have a conversation." I go, "Okay." I go, "They can't act off the infringement warrants. They seem to have everything, all these things, infringement warrants, enforcement orders, notes from their mum, but they don't have the warrants themselves." I go, "Why is that so?" And I said, "Your Honour, and plus you'll see on the court file there that I actually subpoenaed the warrants in the prescribed form, and they're actually in contempt of court if they haven't brought them here today." And he has a look and he says, "Oh, why didn't you bring the warrants?" And he said, "Well, if you adjourn, we'll go and get them." And I said, "Your Honour," he said, "Yeah." I said, "If they can produce the warrants in the prescribed form, I'll pay double." Everyone in the court just shuts up and they're like, "This guy's crazy." And then I said, "Your Honour," I go, I've got to apologise." He said, "What are you apologising for?" I go, "I lied." He said, "What about, Mr. Dixon?" I said, "Well, you know how I said I'd pay double?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "I'll pay triple." And I turned to the lawyer and I said, "That'd be a pretty good day for you. You can pay for the warrants and then you can take home double in your own pocket. That'll be a profitable day. So why don't you go and get the warrants?" And so they adjourned for 2 weeks. We come back 2 weeks later, and guess what? No lawyers, no sheriff.
So they didn't even show.
They didn't show.
Wow.
And as soon as I saw that, I was like, bang, there it is. They can't produce them. So anyway, this guy there's a little known agency under the Department of Justice called the Infringements Management Enforcement Services, IMES.
Right.
And this bloke jumps up from IMES. He's in a really nice three-piece suit. And I won't say his name. All of these people I can name by name. And this happened back in 2017. Remember them all by name. This particular representative of IMES jumps up and he says, I can help you with that matter, Your Honour. I'm a friend of the court." So he jumps up and he says, "Yes, well, how can you help?" And he said, "Well, I'm just here to talk about that matter in respect of this." And he just starts rambling on about rubbish. Okay. And I said, objection, Your Honour. He said, what, Mr. Dixon? I said, let's cut to the chase. We came back here. We're back here two weeks later. And the purpose of the adjournment was so that they could produce the warrants in the prescribed form. Has he got the warrants in the prescribed form so that we can establish subject matter jurisdiction? And he just turns to this particular gentleman and he says, well, have you got the warrants in the prescribed form? And he puts his head down like this. And I'm like, bang, there it is again. He says, no, Mr. Dixon's correct. We can't produce any of his warrants. And I said, Your Honour, don't worry about my warrants. What about anybody's warrants? He puts his head down again. He says, yeah, Mr. Dixon's right. We can't produce any warrants from within the Infringements Act system from 2006 to 2017. We can't produce any of them. And this was actually in early, I think this was in about March or April 2018, because what I'd done was in 2017, late 2017. And by that stage, the Fines Reform Act had taken over from the Infringements Act, although it was still a valid act, and there was they gutted the act, and there was a handful of things that were still valid within the Infringements Act that carried over. And he says, yeah, we can't produce any of the warrants from that system because it's actually a contract, that particular system. You can go and see it was a contract that was signed by the Attorney General's office, and there was some particular families of a particular ilk, I won't get into the details, that had the contract for the collection of the infringements, and they paid, I think it was 303 or $313 million for the contract. So basically, it's a company managing the infringement system for profit. They've got to collect their $300 odd million before they make any profit. So do you think they're there in the interest of justice or the interest of gaining their money back and then making a profit? I say it's the latter.
I'm inclined to agree.
Yeah. So anyway, it's quite interesting. He says, Mr. Dixon's got a couple of fines from the Fines Reform Act system and we can produce them. I go, yeah, but Your Honour, it's got no subject matter jurisdiction because he can't produce the warrants. This is why we came back here. And it was quite interesting because the magistrate just then ruled in favour of the sheriff, saying that, yeah, we're going to close that loophole in regards to giving the vehicle back. But you don't have to give your vehicle back, Mr. Dixon, that's fine. Okay. Little did they know I'd sold it already.
Rightio.
So, so basically that was the catalyst, or that's where I ended up, in the end, in regards to infringements. And all of those infringements actually, they actually remained dormant for a very, very, very long time until only 3 or 4 months ago. But I've dealt with them now, and they've all been expiated. So
even after all that, they attempted to resurrect them from the dead.
100%. 100%.
Wow. See, I was there for the first part of the story where you got your car back when we were sitting there at the Community Law Resource Association all them years ago.
Yep.
But I didn't realise it had kept going. Wow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, they want blood out of a stone, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Well, they're definitely keen to try and not knock anyone on the head that's doing this sort of stuff, clearly, And we've seen the ABC recently sort of going on about the... what's the ridiculous term they've got for fucking sovereign citizen? All these sovereign citizens, and these websites with testimonials, and I couldn't help but notice that website with testimonials seemed rather familiar. Even if they didn't point out which actual website it had come from, but they definitely seem to be very keen to try and knock things down a little bit, eh?
Oh, 100%. I find it quite comical that that term sovereign citizen, because
Mm.
there's a couple of things that we should discuss in regards to that.
I'm all
Firstly,
ears.
firstly, let's look at just what happened a few weeks back. There was a referendum.
Yep.
Now, and when a referendum occurs, well, what happens? Well, in Australia, Parliament or the government, they're not sovereign. Okay, this isn't my opinion or my thoughts or anything. Okay,
Mm.
these are the words of the High Court. They've proclaimed it. Okay, and the
Right.
framers. Okay, and Dr. Coburn in the debates leading up to the Constitution prior to Federation said that um, at Federation, parliamentary sovereignty is thrown overboard and sovereignty is vested in the people. And that's true to this day. So when everybody went and voted in the referendum, they came together as the sovereign body of voters or electors in this country. And so everyone that passed their vote, yes or no, in that particular referendum were acting as a sovereign citizen.
Okay. So the term isn't nonsensical. There is actually an application for sovereign citizen.
Well, of course, but there's this negative connotation that they've brought to it. But
Yeah.
that's, to put sovereign and citizen together, you actually can't. You look at who is the sovereign? Well, the sovereign's the monarch.
Yeah.
So look at the monarch, and it's quite interesting because let's not talk about the king, but let's talk about the queen.
Yep.
Because when during the 80s, Australia enacted an act called the Australia Act, and England at the same time enacted an English or a United Kingdom version of the Australia Act. And it was interesting because from 1973, when the United Kingdom entered the European Union, what actually happened was slowly over time, they gave up parts of their sovereign power. And it got to the point where the Queen was actually a citizen of Great Britain. Now, she was the sovereign and she was a citizen. So she's actually the only official sovereign citizen, but that ended once the Brexit um, phenomenon happened, where Britain exited the European Union, and she
Right.
gained well. Britain basically gained back all their power that they'd handed to the European Union. But it's still not completely like that because a lot of European laws that still remain in England from that. So I believe that's probably something they want to visit again in the future, perhaps because there was a lot of resistance from the Parliament to actually, I suppose, grant the outcome of the referendum, where they said no, we don't want to be part of Europe. Probably the
Mm.
most sensible thing they ever did
Yeah,
when you
definitely.
think about it and look into it. So
Mm.
yeah, so this sovereign citizen term is quite an oxymoron. You can't actually put the two together because when a police officer, judge, whoever claims that you're a sovereign citizen, well, it's quite clear that you're not. You're not the monarch. The only time that you can be considered sovereign is when you join the body of voting electors, like we just did in the referendum or at an election, and that's when you become a sovereign citizen.
There you go. Bit of an education for everyone on that one.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
another thing I wanted to sort of touch on because I quite enjoyed those few meetings I managed to get down to with the Community Law Resource Association. Um, how did that all come to pass? Like, what's a good strategy that other communities around the country can employ to sort of do what you guys did there?
It's interesting because there's actually a community law resource association or group up in Queensland. They've contacted me many times.
Okay.
Um, great bunch of people, and they're hungry for knowledge. And there's lots of these splinter groups that are popping up all over the country. Through the 2000s and the 2010s, Melbourne had the biggest population in respect of community law groups, and it just seemed to be the place, and it was really bopping and really alive. There was a lot of energy being generated from Melbourne in regards to it. Now, it was interesting because the Community Law Resource Group became the association, became CLRA, and eventually I actually became one of the presenters for the Community Law Resource Association, and then it branched out into some local government groups, and there were groups getting together, taking on local government and rates and various local government issues. And then there was also, when COVID hit, CLRA went online because we couldn't have any public meetings. So they went to once a month online meetings, which saved a lot of time, because I know when I was chairing the meetings with a couple of other people, we were doing 4 meetings a month, one a week, and in different locations around Melbourne and down in Gippsland. And basically, so that it became a lot easier, because some of the travel was 3 hours, and there and back type thing, and and the amount of resources that they took in regards to fuel, and people were donating their time and their money for fuel and everything. And then the group actually used to charge a fee to get into the halls, and there ended up being a little bit of a kiddie, and then we gave that out to the people that were travelling and everything like that. But eventually it moved online, and one of the gentlemen that was the president, he actually moved to Egypt, and so it fell in a little bit of a heap, and it's being resurrected as we speak. The annual general meetings, which are barbecues, do happen. There's about 3 or 4 barbecues a year. And I believe there's one coming up soon. And I compel the hierarchy of that group to get the date out for that particular meeting, because I'm actually an honorary member, which is great, because of the I suppose the time I gave up. We did it all free of charge. And we went around and did that for a few years, and it was good, because I was learning off that group for so long, and then I got the opportunity to give back to the group, which was good as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That spirit of community is just something that's really been resonating hard in these last 4 years. As COVID, or the period of government overreach, as I like to call it, has really slapped a lot of people in the face with a cold fish and caused a bit of a rude awakening for some. But where was I going to go? Well, actually, somebody's posted a question here that you might be able to deal with. That's coming up on your screen, mate?
Read Part 8 of the Interpretation Act, Queensland. Distance, time, and age. Explain, please. Distance, time, and age. I believe what it's talking about in regards to distance, time, is that in every Interpretation Act and the Commonwealth Interpretation Act, it says on the subject of the measurement of distance, the measurement must be taken in a straight line and on a horizontal plane. So I believe that's what they're referring to there.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, when a measurement is used for a legal purpose, that measurement must be done in a straight line on a horizontal plane. So not down a hill, not around a big sweeping bend. Okay. We've used that many times in the courts here in Victoria. Many people have used it in various courts around the different states. A lot of people have used it successfully. Other people have failed. So it just depends on how you deliver the message to the court. And of course, it does matter who the presiding member is as well, because sometimes, well, they're just engaging in commerce. So sometimes it doesn't matter what you say in a court, you'll always lose. And you know, a lot of the time it's a two-step process, and to get a win, you have to actually go to the second level, the county or district court in your state, to actually get a court that's got a bit of discretion and that aren't just acting as administrators, because all of the lower courts, the magistrates court and the local courts, they're just administrators. They're just administrating. That's all they do. They've got very little discretion in respect of traffic matters, for example. Um, Especially there's certain states that have what's called mandatory sentencing. So basically, the sentence, and I'm not talking about going to jail. It does apply to jailable offences as well, but yeah, the outcome of the case is already written in the statute, and they cannot stray from that. They've got no discretion in regards to that when there's mandatory sentencing.
Rightio. So, where was I going to go? Hasn't come back to me. So,
Well,
there's a lot of things that you that have stemmed, I guess, from the community law resource days. You know, you've now moved on, and you've, a weekly presenter on the Know Your Rights group. You've got your own Constitution Watch website going on. And if people are interested in having a look at that, it's well, actually, there's the email. This is the one button I meant to push. Check that website out. Darren's got a bunch of really amazing work on there. It's and a plethora of research points. And you're also doing some work with the Living Free mob, doing a lawful me sort of presentation a bit. So maybe
yeah,
we can sort of enlighten the viewer onto how your gracious gift to the community, because you did so much, for free. Obviously, you get the benefit of knowledge as well, but it's come back to you in a lots of other ways too, which is something that I'm seeing a lot. With most of us who are really getting into this. The more you give, the more you get.
yeah, totally. I was approached by a couple of friends of mine, Nick Patterson and David Armstrong, and we were actually, this is going back before uh, Living Free came about, and we were working on a different platform together, which is very similar concept to Living Free Lawful Me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a moderator on that particular site, and look, some bad things happened with the owner of that site, and I believe he just, greed got the better of him, and so anyway, that was dismantled, so to speak. And then uh, David Armstrong met, or knew of, Tom Barnett. You know of Tom Barnett?
Yeah, I met him just the other week. Actually, it was
Hmm.
funny. There I am in far north Queensland for the Apocalypso thing, and I come across Gumpy. He was like the first person I seen when I
Yep.
met. We started talking. Like, oh, what? You don't? We rehearsed at the same. Oh, what? Oh, wow. This is trippy. So I had to send you the photo. Going, hey, look who I found. And then the next day I come across Dave and Tom. I'm like, and they're
Yep.
talking about you. I'm like, it just never seems to end. These paths just keep crossing. This is amazing. So yeah, I do. I've personally met them. Where I'm going to actually post a video that we all did together. I was thinking there's 5 podcasters that met up in the far north, out in the back of Mariba, right behind Cairns. And we all sat down and did a bit of a podcast at the end of Saturday's presentation, which is quite amusing. And
Yeah.
just keep an eye on the North Queensland Freedom Network channels to see that. But yeah, sorry, continue. I do know him.
Yeah, so and it was funny. How did I know Nick and Dave? Nick and Dave, they came to the CLRA meetings,
Ah, there you
and
go.
I met them there, and I believe that was when I was presenting. And so and Nick and I got really friendly. Nick's an amazing man, as you're probably aware.
Yeah,
Um,
and he did some tough times there with the police during the whatnot. I think Tony Dobrin put a bit of a video out there. I helped him sort of put that together, last year or was it the year before, somewhere along the lines. If you want to see what poor Nick had to go through,
yep.
yeah, the way the police mobbed
The
on him like
Dobrin
that.
report.
Yeah, the old Dobrin report. So yeah, it was
Yeah,
fun working on that with Tony. So
yeah. Actually, Tony's just flying back from Adelaide today. I was, and if you're watching Tony, my regards.
yeah,
Um,
likewise. G'day, mate.
so yeah, so basically, yeah, Nick and Tom approached me, and as I said, I've been working on that other platform with them, and we were talking about getting together and doing our own platform where there wasn't this greed and this ego and everything like that. And so we thought, yeah, that sounds good. And probably about a year or a year and a half later, it came to fruition through Tom Barnett. Tom wanted to get something happening, and basically Dave's a web designer, and he's worked in corporate businesses for a long time, and very knowledgeable gentleman. And so we thought we'd all put our energy together, and they started the Living Free organisation. And there's various different platforms on there, such as Healthy Me and Grow Me, and help, and all these different me concepts. And then they came up with this one, Lawful Me, and that's when they approached me, and we thought we'd get together, and the rest is history. I've been on there for over a year now. We do a webinar every Monday night, different subject matter. The last week was the Voice, the referendum. We do them on everything and anything, from case law, to dealing with police, right through to constitutional law, and jurisdictional issues, and everything. So there's just a great bunch of like-minded people sharing their experiences and learning, and we're all in it together. And it's interesting because there's a really good, I suppose, learning curve that accelerates up like that instead of that way.
Mm,
And because you can all put your energies together, and you go, hey, I just tried this and it didn't work, don't do that. Or, hey, I tried this is the right route to take.
yeah,
So everybody's learning curve is accelerated, and things happen a lot quicker, which is
yeah.
really good. And not only is there the legal side of things, there's all of these different things. There's now a couple of people over in WA who have joined, and they're basically showing people how to live off the grid. And it just goes on and on and on. And the site's always growing. There's new things popping up all the time, and it's also associated with the Empower movement, the Cal Washington movement.
Okay.
Um,
Well, I'm not
which
familiar with that.
Okay, so Empower is a gentleman named Cal Washington, and basically what Cal did a few years ago, in regards to when the smart meters started happening in America, he started sending notices of liability to the CEOs, and all of a sudden the CEOs were resigning within weeks.
Oh wow.
And yeah, and so they started applying it to government as well, and the same thing started happening. And I know
Rightio.
just recently, some people in the Empower movement from Australia actually sent notices of liability to Mark McGowan, and basically, with some of the follow up um, stages of that process, Mark McGowan resigned, and similarly, our good friend, uh,
Governor
um,
General.
no, not the Governor General,
No.
Daniel Andrews.
Ah, so
Sorry,
he
it's
got
my
one of those
mind
letters. No, you're right.
vector.
So many people have been dropping off like flies lately, so it's kind of hard to tell who
Yeah,
got what letter.
yeah. So just at the moment, just over the last couple of days, I've had a lot of people contact me about those particular notices of liability. There's a real buzz in the air about it. So if you're interested, either go to Lawful Me, Living Free, or or go to the Empower movement. They're amazing sister sites, and they're all on this platform called Mighty Networks. So
Right.
it's definitely worth checking everything out. It works out to be a few dollars a week, and there's just so much information and so much help and so much community, and people sharing and helping each other. It's quite amazing.
Yeah. Well, the brief moments I had with Tom and Dave on the weekend just past was, they seem like really stand up guys and real friendly fellas and whatnot, and hoping to connect back with them again. Maybe get them on the show too to tell us a little bit more about where they come from and how they got going too.
Yeah, well, that's easy. I can reach out, and we can get that happening. Not a problem.
Awesome, mate. So yeah, well, I did get exchange details, so if I have any trouble, I'll hit you up. But yeah, I reckon we can sort that out.
Yeah, most
How are we
definitely.
doing for time? 50 minutes, awesome. We might open this up a little bit and sort of see if people got any questions they might like Darren to answer. While we're waiting for that to come through, I'd like to mention that next week. On Monday, I got another fellow by the name of Dylan Wilson, who was apparently there with us in Canberra, who has an interesting story to tell and share with us. He's got a website, landlawmarshal.org. Some of my blackfella friends have put us onto him. He seems to be doing some interesting work, and I'm curious to see what else he's got going. On Friday, we've got Deborah from the Frog Hospital up here in North Queensland, who is a very interesting environmentalist sort of a person. So definitely tune in next Friday to see what she's got to say. There's some really good stuff there. Definitely remind people to go and check out Constitution Watch. It's a great site. And again, I think it's just what was the damage on that one again, mate? For the
The
paid
damage.
subscription? There's a
Oh, the
paid
paid
subscription and
subscription.
there's a lot of free stuff as well.
Yeah, it's the majority of it's free. There's a paywall, a subscriber only area with a lot of awesome information, and that's it works out to be about $1.19 a week. So it's quite affordable, which equates to about $59 a year, and that
Yeah.
goes to all of the great research and keeping that going. But if you go there, you'll see there is an amazing amount of information on various subjects that not only Australia wide, but reaches out to New Zealand and various other places, Norfolk Island. Um, there's
Yeah, you spent a bit of time over there. I haven't had a chance to ask you, how'd that go over in Norfolk Island? I understand there's a bit of a complex story sort of going on there. Maybe we've got a bit of time to run over it briefly.
Yeah, for sure. I got contacted, and it was actually through living free through Lawful Me. One of the members was actually from Norfolk Island, and she asked me to check out a few things that were happening on Norfolk Island. And I got onto some private webinars with the guys from Norfolk Island and saw what they were going through. And,
So,
and pretty much what's happened on Norfolk Island. Norfolk Island was just quickly. It was the people who live on Norfolk Island are the descendants of the Pitcairn people from Pitcairn Island, who are the descendants of the mutiny on the Bounty. So basically, they ended up on Pitcairn Island. It wasn't the best island for the way that the population was going, and so they made a deal with Queen Victoria at the time, and Queen Victoria said that they could relocate to Norfolk Island. And basically, prior to 1856, when that occurred, Norfolk Island was a penal colony, originally part of. When I say part of New South Wales, all it was being administered by the governor of New South Wales, and then that was given to Van Diemen's Land, Tasmania, and then eventually the deal was struck up between the Queen and the Pitcairn Island people, and the penal settlement was moved to Van Diemen's Land exclusively, and that's why you have a suburb down there called New Norfolk. Um,
ah,
So basically, the Pitcairn Islanders or the descendants. What happened was in 1913, allegedly, Her Majesty, sorry, the king at the time, actually wrote an instrument that basically uh, brought the administration of Norfolk Island under the Commonwealth, and that's through Section 122 of the Constitution. And it basically says the Commonwealth may make laws for the territory that Her Majesty puts under their administration. So it's interesting, and although that did happen, it's very hard to establish and get those original documents. Like a lot of it is just believe me that it happened. There's a plethora of information and British and Australian evidence that shows that Norfolk Island is not part of Australia, and it never was part of Australia. It's just being administered by Australia. That's all it is. So they're just basically
Right.
rubber stamping everything. And Norfolk Island had its own legislative assembly, so it had its own form of government. And in 2016, Norfolk Island asked for a loan off the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth interpreted that to mean you want us to move in and take over and usurp your legislative assembly and dissolve it and put in a form of local government under the Local Government Act of New South Wales. So all of a
Oh.
sudden you've got this territory, and now it's being taken over. It's had its government dissolved. Um, it's having a local system of local government being imposed on it by the Commonwealth. That's very interesting in regards to that being a state power. But let's move on.
Yeah.
Um, and then they're applying the Local Government Act of one of the states. And if you actually go to Section 4 of the New South Wales Constitution, it provides uh, it provides the area which the New South Wales law applies, and it's basically from the Western Australian border, because originally New South Wales went all the way to the Western Australian border, and just to the other side of Lord Howe Island. But it does not in that area does not encapsulate Norfolk Island. So they don't actually have any geographical jurisdiction there in regards to enforcing their laws there. But that's what the Commonwealth have done. They've enforced the laws of New South Wales on Norfolk Island. And if you think that's pretty crazy, when you go to court in Norfolk Island, um, whether you go to the Court of Petty Sessions or the Supreme Court, when you go there, you're to apply the rules of the lower courts and the Supreme Court of the Australian Capital Territory. And it's
Right.
interesting because you think, well, hold on, they dissolved their government, so how do they actually have representation on Norfolk Island? Well, that's a good question, because when you live on Norfolk Island, you're actually a second class citizen. You're meant to be a citizen of Australia, but there's two levels of citizens. One that can, like you and me, that can go and visit their local member and have something heard in Parliament. And then there's the people of Norfolk Island, and allegedly their member is one of the members in the ACT. But when you contact her, her office says to you, "Oh, we'd like to help, but we can only help people within the Australian Capital Territory," even though
What?
it's wacky. It's completely wacky. Another thing is, when you go to Norfolk Island, it's an international flight, but it's meant to
Okay.
be part of Australia. And when you're on Norfolk Island and you try to ring Australia, the mainland, even though it's not the mainland, um, it's an international phone call.
Seems like they can't seem to make up their mind whether they're up, down, left, or right.
Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy what they're doing. So the people of Norfolk Island have been fed up, because this has been going on since 2016.
Yeah.
This takeover, and they said enough is enough, and they've basically formed their own government on the
Wow.
island, because at the moment the system of government there is local government, and that local government is administered by people from Australia, and they fly in and out.
So
Okay.
they're never actually really there for anybody to contact you
Oh no, they're there, but they fly
from
in
time
and
to
out.
time.
They're
Yeah.
not. They're not the Norfolk Islanders. So the system of government is being run from another
Yeah.
place, so to speak.
So where are they at this particular point without getting too detailed? Because there are a couple of questions here I want to address.
Okay, so basically where they're at is they've formed their own new government. It's gaining huge momentum. Um, Now, basically, they're about to hopefully get some more structures in place, governmental structures, because they're starting this from the beginning. One other thing I just want to mention: when the Commonwealth came in and took over the government, Norfolk Island had their own system of GST. Okay, unique to the island, and that was paying for all the infrastructure and the pensions and everything like that. And that was turning over about $6 to $8 million a year. The Commonwealth came in and abolished that and said, in replacement of that, we're going to impose council rates on your properties.
So they didn't have council rates at that point.
No.
Oh wow.
And
So that
so
must have
that's
been a big
being
slap.
imposed, and yeah, a lot of people are struggling. A lot of people can't afford it. And last year they said, "Oh, we're gonna increase it by it was I think it was about 120% or something," and everyone was outraged. And they said, "Oh, it's all right. We're not going to do it. We'll do it slowly over 4 years. So increase it by 25% each year.
It sounds like they're still doing it.
Slow incremental steps.
Yeah, it's typical of these people, isn't it?
Gradualism."
Yeah. So anyway, we got this first question here, which I guess is kind of related to a straw man structure. I'm thinking. What are your thoughts on this?
What I don't understand is how a birth certificate that was created without your permission can be used by authorities and locked into the system for one's whole life. Surely one should be allowed to undo it when one is of age. Well, there there could be a way. I believe you need to look at the canons, because in the canons there is a way to actually succeed with that. There's lots of people around Australia who are chasing this at the moment.
Mm.
But yeah, I agree that entity, what I like to call the crown created entity. Um, this is the thing, do you administer that, or does the state administer that particular entity? When you go to court, you get to find out, because yes, they do administer that particular entity, and it's about knowing who you are and whether you can administer your own affairs or whether you need the state to administer them. So people will understand that in regards to this is like a 2 hour conversation, this
Yeah.
particular question.
I see where you're going, and I think I've had 2 hour conversations with a few people around this construct, and whether you're the private person or the public person, and all that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's not an easy question to answer. So, but that will
Yeah,
hopefully
it's not.
guide. Was it Jasens? Is that how you say it? I hope I didn't insult you. Jasens, I'm thinking. Hopefully that gives you a bit of something, food
One,
for
one
thought.
thing I'll say, Batty, is be careful what you wish for, because
Yeah.
the birth certificate brings benefits and privileges as well.
Mm.
And when you remove that particular entity from your life, you lose all those benefits and privileges.
Yes, and I
Right?
have spoken to a couple of people who have managed to remove themselves from that system, and now it's like, well, okay, that's what you wanted. See ya.
Mm.
You're on your own.
And you might want to have a look at capitis demitio minimum, medium, and maxima
Maxima.
in regards
Mm.
to uh, the
Method in which
position
a
that you
name is written.
hold,
Mm.
and whether you would like to actually go into full bondage and slavery. And yeah, so I advise you to have a look at that before
Yeah.
doing anything drastic like getting rid of the birth certificate.
Yeah. Very wise words. Here we have a quick one. Any tips for combating the offshore wind farms, southwest Victoria and lower South Australia? And I'd also actually like to bring in North Queensland and pretty much all down the coast where they're bulldozing rainforests to stick these bloody eyesores up. Nothing rings out, I'm saving the environment, quite like
Mm.
I'm going to bulldoze a whole bunch of rainforests and stick up a bunch of useless wind farms.
Yeah, look, a lot of it's very difficult because you're talking about a lot of these particular wind farms are going up on private properties.
Yeah.
So, so it's very difficult to I suppose, interfere with that private agreement. But one way to actually go about it was what we were speaking of earlier, which would be the notice of liability that Cal Washington has. Well, it's essentially the three-step process, the notices that you give,
Hmm.
and he's just basically taken that and put it on steroids.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is one way of dealing with it, and lots of people are getting a lot of results in regards to basically approaching CEOs of these companies actually doing this sort of thing. So that's one thing that I would recommend you go and have a look at. And
Have you got kind of like a template sort of something that people can sort of get started on there? Maybe perhaps on Constitution Watch or something? Or...
look, that's not my work to give out. As I
Okay.
said, I'll direct you to Cal Washington,
All right.
Empower. Or Lawful Me, the Living Free,
Mm-hmm.
if you want the Australian version. But I believe there's some sort of deal where you can get both, and it's a discount, I believe. But yeah, that's where I could possibly direct you towards is in regards to a notice of liability to whoever that entity is to cease and desist in regards to the actions that they're doing. Because if you can provide certain damages that are occurring, you can actually start invoicing those people for those particular damages.
Rightio. Just sort of throw a couple of comments up here while I look for a question.
Hey, Batty, did you
Yeah,
hear
mate.
about what happened in Victoria? I do believe it was yep, maybe 10 days ago.
I'll just quickly answer Michael here. Well, I just have this habit of just bouncing from time to time, to be honest. It's some strange little thing I'm trying to work on. I keep seeing myself bouncing my legs, and I'm like, oh, I've got to stop doing that. But thanks for pointing it out, mate.
It's called the sugar addiction.
Yeah, it could be. It could be the sugar in this glass here. There's something else in there too.
Exactly. Yeah, but did you hear about the biggest constitutional challenge in the last 25 years?
I can't say that I did. Please enlighten us.
Okay. So there was a landmark ruling in the High Court, and it was over taxes. A tax got ruled unconstitutional, and it was actually
Ah.
yeah. The Victoria had this law called the Zero Low Emission Vehicle Charge Act, and it came out in 2021. And basically, the Victorian government said, well, people who own electric cars, because they're not buying fuel, they're not actually contributing to the fuel excise tax, which pays for the upkeep of the roads. So
Hmm.
we're going to charge a tax, and basically what you had to do was once a year you had to take a photo of your speedometer, and they'd work it out at a certain amount of cents. I think it was 2.5 cents per kilometre.
Rightio. I remember hearing about that, thinking, "Oh God, here we go."
Yeah, so basically, the High Court ruled that it was unconstitutional, that tax,
Mm.
and that it was an excise tax on commerce.
And that's
And
obviously snowballed.
oh, 100%. I've got.
Yeah.
I'll quickly. I'll read this paragraph from it, It says
Actually,
the High Court.
I think we've got a private chat. You can drop if you got something there. You can drop in the private chat. We can bring it up so everybody can have a look.
Okay, it's actually on the Constitution Watch website.
Oh, okay,
So it
I
says,
can do that.
I'll give you a link.
Yeah, too easy. That'll be good. It'll
Uh,
save me a bit of time searching.
how do I get that to you? Oh, private chat. Here we are.
Yeah.
Okay, here we are. But the High Court, by a majority, held that tax act for electric cars was invalid, and the court
Okay.
reopened and overturned its decision in Dickinson's Arcade versus Tasmania in 1974, which held by majority that a tax on the consumption of goods does not constitute a duty of excise. The court held that an excise within the meaning of Section 90 of the Constitution is an inland tax on goods. The question of whether a tax is to be characterised as a tax on goods turns on whether, first, the tax bears close relationship to the production or manufacture, sale, distribution, or consumption of goods, and the second, whether the tax is of such a nature as to affect the goods as the subjects of manufacture or production or as articles of commerce. So basically, they're talking about taxes on commerce.
Hmm.
Now, this is going to open up the doors probably for a challenge on uh, car registration, for example, because that's a tax um, on um, on an article of commerce.
Could this apply to license fees and I mean pretty much everything they're doing to regulate and tax the hell out of us?
100%.
Wow, maybe I'll hold off on getting this truck license I've been chasing down because it's costing me a bloody small fortune. Maybe I'll just wait and see what happens there.
It doesn't mean that you won't have to get a license.
Yeah, but should you
It
have to
just
pay for it
means,
every bloody year?
well, you know what I'm seeing is the Commonwealth are going to probably take over those services.
Hmm.
Possibly, who knows? It's probably a logistical nightmare, but
Yeah.
they've been trying to nationalise a lot of these things, especially heavy vehicles, and what you're talking about, trucks. They've got a nationalised system now.
Hmm. Rightio. Because yeah, I know a few people are getting some. You know, I was actually talking to a fella last night. Who's a truckie, truck driver, and he knows quite a few people who just got massive fines for the tiniest little, discrepancy in their logbook or whatnot. But anyway, let's have a look at this question here. What's the best text for a home trespassing sign? I believe you had a win in court with that not long ago.
Not me. There was a young lady from New South Wales called Santia Romanis,
Mm-hmm.
and she actually had what she did. What happened was during COVID, she went to a printer's, and she wanted to get some flyers printed up in regards to what was happening with COVID,
Mm-hmm.
and basically the printer informed the local police. And I've just put a link in the chat where you can go and have a look at that case. And in the case, it actually puts the wording of the sign that she had on her signs in her property when the police trespassed. And she actually sued the police and she won.
Nice.
Mind you, it
And
was only about 18 and a half grand. But the thing was, and I say this, what a huge effort for a single mum, okay,
yeah,
and just to reinstall confidence in people. The police cannot just come onto your land, okay, just to basically, she hadn't committed an offence.
yeah,
Okay, they were just going to have a quiet little chat with her. It was the Kyogle police, so
rightio.
in New South Wales there. Now, it was interesting because they jumped the fence, and Sanchia wasn't home herself, and her daughter was,
Oh,
and they were a bit concerned by it all, and And anyway, Sanchia took it to the Supreme Court, and there was a few issues getting it to a level where the court would accept the paperwork, and a friend of hers contacted me, and we just went over a few case laws, such as Ibbott versus New South Wales and Plenty versus Dillon, a few of those cases, and she got her paperwork up to date, and she came out with a really good win, which is really good. Just for the the everyday average Australian, and like I said, she's just a mum. She's just doing her own thing,
Yeah,
and
never really studied any of this sort of stuff before. Just decided to hang on. I'm going to defend myself. I'm not having this.
exactly. And that's what I love about this story, because it just shows that with a little help, and a little bit of determination
Mm.
and a little bit of effort, you can achieve most things.
And I guess that's what I really wanted to try and convey to people, with our chat today, is that, you know, all you got to do is put a little bit of effort in. You hear so often, I come across people who have got that defeated attitude, like, we've already lost. What's the point? Oh, you can't beat them. What's the
Yeah,
point of this? What's the point of that? But here we are demonstrating that, yeah, it can be done. And I mean, the last time I walked into court was, with a little bit of some wording from you, and I walked in 10 foot tall, 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And when the judge asked, I understand you want to fight this. I'm like, bloody oath, mate, with every word, with every bone in my body, you know. And, oh, we'll organise a brief of evidence. Oh, thank you, Your Honour. That'd be awesome. I've been asking the prosecution. They don't want to seem to play ball, mate. They will rather waste your time, you know. And just that attitude seemed to have possibly stirred things up, because when we come back to the next mention, they dropped the charges the day before. I never got a chance to actually play in court. I'm a little bit disappointed.
yep.
But, I'm sure I'll get another opportunity, because these money-hungry buggers keep trying to find the hell out of me every time I drive somewhere.
Yeah, well, that's it. It just takes a little bit of determination, and a lot of the times those things will happen. Like I know in Victoria, most of the COVID charges they were dropping. There's still a few that they're pursuing, but
Mm.
predominantly a lot of people who stood up and would not take no for an answer. A lot of those people were having their charges dropped the night before. They were getting contacted by prosecution, and they were being dropped, and that was happening all over the place. And a lot of these charges were you know beyond the power of the state,
Yeah.
realistically.
Yeah, and just to fan the flames of some of these mainstream media articles, you might even call them trumped up charges.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Look at Nick's case, for example, Nick Patterson.
Yeah.
If you've seen the video footage of that, and then you read the statements of the police officers, the affidavits, and you just laugh, because
Mm.
if you read all that, you go, "Wow, this Nick Patterson, he's a really bad guy. We better get him off the streets." And
Mm.
then you go and watch the video, and you see what actually happened, and you go, "Now
Yep.
hold on, that what I'm looking at doesn't correspond with what they've actually put in their statements. They're in a lot of trouble." And I think there's been about 3 police prosecutors that have dropped it. Okay, because police prosecutors are taught to, if they look at the case, and if there's a probability of losing, so they only really go in and proceed with the matter if they can see that they're going to win. They've got all their ducks lined up in a row.
Mm.
Okay, these prosecutors are clearly looking at Nick's case and going, "Holy moly, my training says get out."
Yeah.
And so I think they're on their 3rd prosecutor now.
Oh wow. So they just keep handballing this to somebody else each time.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
It keeps on going, and it keeps on getting put off and adjourned off to another date.
So I thought they'd kind of come to a resolution of that. I didn't still realize they were still mucking around with it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they are.
Mm.
He won the first one. There was one in the magistrates' court where he got found guilty, um, and that was the one where the video went viral, where the health officer came to his gym, and he was speaking
Mm.
to him out the front, and there was 27 cops there, and yeah, he was found guilty of that in the magistrates court. And then when he took it to judicial review in the Supreme Court, the police suddenly wrote to the court and to Nick and said, "We will not interfere with what the court decides because the charge is actually unlawful."
Wow. There you go.
So
So,
remember I was talking about the magistrates court earlier? It's just the court of administrators.
yeah.
That's what they did. They administrated it. That's what they do.
Mm.
We don't care what happened. You're guilty. Bang.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not until you get that fire in your belly and take it further. And remember, I was saying you should usually expect to take it to the next highest court if you want to actually succeed. I'm not saying
Yeah.
that doesn't mean you can't succeed in the magistrates court, because you can.
Yeah. Most certainly. Got another interesting question here that kind of one of those questions you hear from time to time. What are your thoughts on this one?
Darren, are the governments of Australia constitutional or corporate? That's a very interesting question.
I thought you might like that one.
I would say that yes, and the evidence. Look at the Commonwealth government, for example. Well, the answer is
Okay.
yes and no.
So, well, yeah, yes to constitutional, yes to corporate. Like,
Yes to both.
okay, so they exist in both realms, much
But
like,
no, but
private and
no
public
to
and
constitutional as well.
okay.
So there's an act from 2013 called the Public Performance and Government Act.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go into that act, you will see that there are corporate Commonwealth entities and non-corporate Commonwealth entities. They're talking about the agencies and the departments and everything like that. And there's actually documents that you can get, and you'll see there's lists of who the corporate and non-corporate entities are. Okay, so yes, there are these agencies, and yes, they are companies, they're corporations, and they are performing functions of government. So yes, a lot of the government is corporate.
It depends on, which entity you're dealing with in a sense.
Exactly. Now,
Mm.
the states, if you look at the states quite interesting, because you'll find that most of the parliaments of the states don't actually have the correct legal status anymore. They're actually body corporates.
Right. So then that's similar to the way councils are operating, correct?
100% council or body corporate. And there's case law from, this isn't me saying, this is the High Court saying it,
Yeah.
that local governments, okay, the employees of the local government are not employees of the Crown. And therefore, whoever they're employed by, which is the local government, is not the Crown either.
Right.
They're a body corporate. Now, I don't know about you, but I've looked into this, and there's a particular legal status which a government holds, and that legal status is a body politic, not a body corporate. When you're a
So
body politic, sorry,
So what's a body politic?
a body politic is government. That is the legal status of government.
Okay.
So that particular legal status gives them the power to perform an act of government.
Righty.
So why do we have all these body corporates performing functions of government when realistically it's reserved for a body politic? It's interesting. There's another case. There's a case from Tasmania. It was back in the 50s, and that was Launceston Hydroelectric Company versus Tasmania. And Launceston Hydroelectric Company were actually what's called a statutory corporation. So they only existed because the Tasmanian government wrote an act and created that particular company to run the hydroelectric commission there and the dam, um, the hydroelectric plant, should I say.
Yeah.
And they, with all their arrogance, like most of these entities, said, we don't have to pay local council rates because we are the Crown. We're created under an act.
Mm-hmm.
And it came out in the High Court said that no, a statutory entity created in an act is not the Crown, and nor does it hold the benefits or privileges of the Crown, such as being exempt from council rates.
Okay.
So there's many of these cases you can put together for various different outcomes, or it depends on what you're trying to fight in court. There's lots of case law.
Yeah. Now I've got another interesting question here. To me, I'd be thinking, well, it's just a government website, and the governments have created a local governments act, and they're trying to make it look all like these people are official. That's the way my take on it. What's your take, mate?
Um, yeah, it's interesting because, for example, if you look at Victoria Police have a .gov.vic.au website.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and on the face of it, any normal person would go to that website and go, "Oh, the police, they're the government." Well, I put it to you that because and once again you're going to say, "Well, why are you saying that?" And once again, I'm not saying it. I'm just telling you where you can find the information, and you can find that information in the Crown Proceedings Act of Victoria, Section 23, which says that police officers and protective services officers are not employees or agents of the Crown.
Mm.
So it's quite
But
interesting.
they're being paid by the government.
Are they?
Wow,
Well,
from another
well,
point of view, they're being paid by me, the taxpayer, and you, and everybody else who pays tax. So, I guess
yeah,
to
yeah.
a certain degree, it's a
There is,
point of view.
there is. Well, that's the thing. They're a company providing services,
Mm.
and they're just invoicing the government for the services that they provide. It's like if you, like for example, the AFL, when you see the police at the ground, the police are actually invoicing the AFL
Yeah.
for their presence. And if there's a protest somewhere, like if, all those people, I can't remember exactly, it's the people like David Icke and people like that that come into the country. And if there's protests out the front and police have to attend, to provide crowd management, all of a sudden those particular people from overseas are getting, $80,000, $90,000 invoices.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's been happening as well.
So, is the Victorian police considered a Victorian police service? Because I know in Queensland it used to be Queensland Police Force, and they've changed it to a complete to Queensland Police Service now. Has the same happened in Victoria?
No, we used to have the police service, and I believe it's now the police force.
Okay, well, we got it the other way around here.
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
That's
You'll find that
interesting.
most of them have been corporatized.
Yeah. I mean, we've definitely got that centralized sort of structure
Hmm.
here. Like, I jump on the phone to the police, I end up talking to Brisbane, and then they're going to redirect the call to appropriate people. You can't, get straight to the police department in your local area here
Hmm.
in Queensland at the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you speak to a police officer and you say, "Do you work for the government?" They go, "Yeah, of course I do."
Mm.
Ah, okay, it's quite interesting. It's not what it says in the statutes, and police are meant to be independent officers and they're not meant to be taking dictation from the government. Now, if they're not employees or agents of the Crown, so for example in Victoria, and the Crown is the state of Victoria, then who are they working for? Private company.
Yeah.
Okay. The contracts to the government, their services. But police are meant to be, independent office holders under the Queen. And it was interesting because back in 2012 there was a case where a police officer got PTSD on the job, and he tried to sue the government, and they said, no, you can't sue us because you don't work for us. You're not employed under the Public Administration Act of the state. Each state has like a Public Administration Act where everybody's employed under that act except for the judiciary.
Mm.
And in ours, like that like when COVID started here, it was quite interesting because we were looking at the act, and there had to be you had to be an authorised officer under the act so as to administer the Public Health and Wellbeing Act.
Mm.
And so I had a look at that, and I was like, hold on, and started looking at the definition of authorised officer. And an authorised officer had to be under the health department, and had to have a particular ID, and they had to be employed under the Public Administration Act. So I went and looked at the Public Administration Act. In the Public Administration Act, it says that this act does not apply to Victoria Police. I'm like, wow, they're not employed by the state. So if they're not employed by the state, how can they be an authorised officer under the Public Health and Wellbeing Act? And then we published all this information on the Constitution Watch website, and that was in about September of 2020. By October, they changed the legislation after we released that and made police authorised officers under the Act, even though it didn't comply, as they weren't actually employees under the executive, under the Public Administration Act. So they just went, yeah, we're just going to do it anyway.
A bit like Elbow and The Voice.
Very much so.
Here's another question. How's your time going? You still got some time for us, or do you
Yep.
call it a day? Yeah, cool. I think you'll like that one.
Is the ATO a corporation? No.
Short answer. Direct and to the point.
I'll explain. Why is the ATO not a corporation? Because when you're a corporation, you're a legal entity, and
There we go.
allegedly, once again, it's in a high court case. The ATO are not a legal entity, and therefore can't be a company.
So what would you classify them as then? Can they be classified? Or are they just a rogue entity onto their own?
I could, but I wouldn't like to do it on a public forum.
Fair enough. I'll take that. They don't officers have their own ABN? I know that the respective police departments do.
They do.
But as for individual officers, I don't know myself.
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
You do? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So they're kind of subcontractors in a sense.
I believe so.
Oh.
That's what I'm led to believe. Hey, if there's any police officer, actually, you know what? I've got a few friends who are police officers. I can send a text message and get a 100% confirmation on that.
That'd be cool. Nothing like getting straight from the source, because we like to make sure that we're factual, and that, the things we say can be backed up. What else we got? So, Spur in Queensland portray themselves as a government dependent, but is actually a corporation collection company. I would be
Yep.
inclined to agree with that assessment.
Yep, 100%.
Queensland Police Service, New South Wales Police Force, WASA, Department of Police, Fire, Emergency Management, TAS, blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool. Well, you just capped off a bunch of names. I'm not sure why. Sorry, JJ. Um, all acts and legislation apply to persons. All cops' names, birth certificate number. I'm not sure where we're going with that one. I'm not sure there. Isn't Elbow with Clown in America, US? Wow, I must say I did see, Elbow and Biden together, and the first thing I thought is which one's going to trip over and fall off the stage first? I don't know. What was your first thoughts when you seen those two clowns were getting together?
Well, yeah, it's quite interesting there. Isn't it interesting how he just happened to go there after the voice referendum? And I bet you he was going to be proclaimed as some sort of, activist and everything else that goes along with it. But that sort of fell flat on its face.
Yeah.
And especially when it was such an overwhelming majority. And it's interesting. I'll say this: the on the night, it got to around about 61%, somewhere around there, the national total for no. And then I noticed that 20% of the votes still needed to be counted.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
fascinating.
I was waiting, and I was waiting,
Mm.
and the numbers haven't really changed. And I'm wondering what's happened to that other 20%.
It's a bloody good question. It was the same as like the last federal election, They called Labor victorious with about 20 odd percent of the vote counted. It's like, well, that's pretty bloody good. I was like, it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing powers of prediction. I mean, I wish I had a crystal ball like this mob do.
Yeah. Look at that comment.
This one, Thieves
Yeah.
ATO.
Yeah.
I'm just clicking through. I didn't
I,
even read it, to be honest.
Victoria, I don't think you should be insulting thieves. Anyway, let's move on.
There's honour among thieves, isn't there?
Believe so.
How do we get our crown deeds in Victoria?
That's a very good question. Um, Crown deeds. Firstly, you'll only have a deed if you can trace it back to the original crown deed. A lot of properties have been split up and subdivided, and so if you've got a subdivided property, there is no crown deed unless you go back to the original property before it was subdivided.
And that would be the lot numbers, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Um, See, the actual original deed, um, that that forms part of the property. It's actually a chattel to the property, and you own it. And I don't care whether the government write a law and say it's not valid. It's irrelevant whether it's valid or invalid.
Mm.
It is and forms part of the property. And it is the historical link to trace that back to the original Crown grant. And that particular Crown grant, if you can trace it back, that establishes the chain of links that show it through every different owner or ownership through that particular deed or grant. But there'll be some more interesting things that will be coming up in the future in regards to titles.
I believe Daryl's got some work going on that, correct? Was it the Lawhagen, I believe?
No, no.
No?
Um, there's a there's a particular registry on a particular island we may have discussed earlier,
Let's see where you go.
and that would be an original Crown registry, and basically that is, I believe, open for business and
Mm.
taking registration of people's titles, and yeah, so it's just a matter of lifting the title from the current registry and bringing it over to the other registry.
Actually, that was a question I wanted to hit you with, actually, in regards to the land title thing. I know Len Harris had a bit of a case going, and you've had a bit of a yarn with Len. I haven't been able to get a hold of him myself. Next time you see him, remind him I'm here, and I'd love to have a chat with him on the channel if he's up for it.
Okay, yeah, I can organise that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome because he's unfortunately been a bit unresponsive for me. I'm not sure what's going on there. And there've been a few people here in the community that were a little bit concerned because, they obviously donated a little bit of money in the hope that that court case was going to go ahead and resolve the issues, because there's a lot of people who, have their own title deeds and whatnot. And we want to know what the hell's gone on. And it does seem the Queensland government's had a hell of a lot to do with it. Is there anything that you can share? Obviously, because as I understand it, he's dropped the case in order to pursue more knowledge so that when he does go forward with the case, he gets it bang on, because he doesn't want to set a horrible legal precedence and stuff this up. Is there anything you can elaborate on there?
Yeah, look, I believe Len's down in South Australia at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I was over there doing a workshop maybe 3 weeks ago, maybe 4. And Len came along. I was over there with Daryl O'Brien, and Len came along. We did a full day workshop, and the guys were discussing titles. There's a progression that's occurring right at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't elaborate too much.
Yeah, we don't want to let the cat out of the bag, obviously.
What that progression is, but if you're following what Daryl's doing, you'll see that basically things are moving forward. But with the new registry, there were some issues with the previous registry that he was working with,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll have to ask someone in regards to that, because I don't like to speak ill will of anyone.
Fair
And
enough.
and so basically, yeah, they've moved on to this this new registry, which has Crown seals backing it up, and legitimacy of government. So we'll see what transpires in the near future. I've been in contact with those people. I am aware of them all. I speak to them all regularly, and there's a large amount of people that are working towards this, bringing this together and into fruition.
So, in short, for those people who are a little bit concerned about what's going on, we can have a little bit of faith to know that there are some good people working on it.
100%. Things will be falling into place very soon. There's already been some titles shifted, so the cogs are turning, so to speak.
No worries. Well, I think we might have to kind of leave it around there. We are pushing up to a 2 hour mark, and my back teeth are floating, to
Ooh,
say the least.
that's
So,
flown.
yeah, it did. It was a really good chat. I want to
Hmm.
thank you heaps for finally coming, getting off. Sorry, bad wording. I want to thank you heaps for coming on the show, and I'm glad we finally got a chance to do it. That's the way I wanted to go with this.
And
So
I've got
yeah,
to apologise about the 3 reschedules to get to today.
no, it's all right, mate. We got there in the end. That's the important thing. And yeah, I appreciate you coming on. I'm sure everybody
We
appreciates
did.
everything that you've said. So, once again, you can follow Darren's work on Constitution Watch. Obviously, I don't know how much you endorse this particular product, but I know I've got a copy. And your work on Know Your Rights on those Tuesday night shows are amazing. And thanks to Mike for the hat. When again, if you jump onto the Know Your Rights show and whatnot, and I think I'm not sure what the subscription is there, but I was on the show myself in I think it was August last year. So
I believe
I
so.
dig through the records and see how often we cross paths there. Thank you very much for coming on, mate. I want to also point out to people that you can help support my work by going to the Linktree thing that's in the descriptions there. You can find, a few ways you can chip in to keep me functioning so I can keep doing these sorts of things. We've got a GoFundMe going for the Indigenous documentary. For those of you who've seen the video where, the Indigenous people of 28 different tribes come together and said, we said a big fat no. There's a hell of a lot more to that story we want to work on. If you can chuck in on this one, and this will probably be the last big documentary I do that won't be going behind a paywall. So this is a proper funded sort of project. It's going to be a really good one. Any questions or stories you want to share, you can contact me there. Of course, we're setting up the Proton, which is where we're going to have some stuff going behind the paywall that's coming up, because I've got 4 kids to feed, and the way things are going, I might just be able to pull out the old Total Recall quote and start saying, I've got 5 kids to feed. I've put a TV in the bedroom, boys and girls, so hopefully that won't come to pass. But now that we've said all that, thank you very much, mate, and thank you all for watching.
See you again soon.
Till next time, mate. See ya.